Rules about bringing dogs in?
I'm not in charge of that.
I just won't be here.
Wait a minute, I thought you were supposed to help me with the rules.
I am. I can be your enforcer, but I don't have anything to do with that.
Alrighty, we're gonna go ahead and get the meeting started. Call the
started.
Planning Commission meeting to order and ask you to all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty. Sally, if you could help us with the roll call, please.
Certainly. Mayor Kent Atwell,
Present.
Dave Greenway,
Here.
Dan Jaschinski,
Here.
Ed Merrick,
Here.
Jim Ryer,
Here.
Laura Schultz,
Here.
Robert Weiler,
Here.
Alderperson Tim Eicher is absent, and we also have Planner Roger Dupler and Building Inspector Scott Hussinger with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the first item on the agenda is public hearing number 1. Height regulations, increased permit City of Delafield, consideration of proposed zoning text amendment to repeal and recreate a portion of 17.15, number 3, to prohibit building height increases in CBD1 district. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this public hearing? Sure, come on up.
Hi, I'm Dave Ziegler, 166 Fieldstone Road in Delafield. I'm a member of the Delafield Citizens for Economic Growth, and we've been here many times, as you know. And I just want to let you know that we support this type of economic development that the Hendricks Project represents. We appreciate the time and work that the Planning Commission has put in, as well as the mayor, to update the building codes. These revised codes are necessary to move our city into a better financial position for the future. We're hopeful that tonight these revised codes can be approved and sent then to the Common Council for final approval. Regarding the architectural appearance of the buildings, there will never be common consensus on that. Everyone has their own personal preferences as far as what these buildings should look like as far as style and appearance. The way I look at it, if 1/3 of the citizens love it and 1/3 hate it and 1/3 are rather ambivalent, that's about as good as you're going to expect. And I'd like to defer to the professionals in the architectural field when it comes to that. So I just want to, again, thank you for your work and appreciate you moving forward on these building codes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Lynn, would you like to be next?
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Lynn Holton, 485 Lillian Court, Delafield. I object to this public hearing again as unauthorized and premature according to our zoning code 1787. If you review the minutes of last month's meeting held on 8/28, the Plan Commission did not call or schedule a public hearing. The intent was to further define the height formula starting and ending point. Also, this item is not listed on the agenda for discussion or action. That is not a fair warning to the public and fails due process. I would assume action cannot be taken tonight. That said, here we are. I included in your handout the current version of 1715. Item 3. I do not think you can consider this option without considering the next public hearing and also zoning the other ordinance that's being revised to avoid a cumulative effect of 65 feet. I may be wrong, but I'm reading that into it. On this new version, on page 3, these are the changes that are being made. I have highlighted the added words and crossed out the words I have questions about. Where did the starting point above the first floor elevation come from? The Plan Commission has not discussed this as a beginning measurement. I think I know what is intended, but my fear in the scenario that I see that comes to mind is what occurred at Delafield Square and the McCormick Apartments behind the Town Bank. The first levels are dedicated to parking, and the entrance is at street level. Then the earth, or if you want to do it later, a partial wall, could be used to conceal the true first floor, allowing this new suggested measurement to begin at the ceiling of the parking level, adding 10 feet or more to the height of from street grade. Is the parking at Delafield Square and the McCormick Apartments true underground parking? I think not. It needs to be clarified and worded better to prevent an unattended extra 10 feet or more to the height of, and that proposed design is in the next public hearing, but you need to prevent any unintended extra feet of height that uses this technique, or a proposal that uses this technique to lower construction costs. Who is doing this proposed design grade? Who's proposing it? I believe it is awkwardly worded, as I'm awkwardly doing tonight too, and open to interpretation. I remind you that a conditional use, if it's in the code and the standards are met, you must approve it. It has to be correct, and I appreciate your effort in trying to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak to public hearing number 1? Anyone else for public hearing number 1? Seeing none, public hearing number 1 is now closed. We'll move on to public hearing number 2. Building height definition, City of Delafield, consideration of proposed zoning text amendment to repeal and recreate a portion of 17.24, definition of building height. Text amendment will affect the mechanics used for determining building height. Is there anyone that would like to speak to public hearing number 2? Lynn, come on up.
Lynn Holton, 485 Lillian Court, Delafield. I object to this public hearing as well as unauthorized by the governing bodies according to 1787, item 1 and 2 in the zoning code. This item is also not listed as an action or discussion item on the agenda. Therefore, I assume no action can be taken tonight as the public has not been noticed. In the handout I gave you, please refer to pages 1 and 2. At the bottom of page 1, this is the current 1724 ordinance. 1724 is a zoning ordinance that is basically a list of definitions of terms found in the zoning code. That is all it's meant to be. This approach is I feel out of order because you should be deciding on CBD1 first, and then these are supplemental to it. Here you're doing these first, which will restrict what you can do in CBD1. It's out of order in how you're approaching it. If you look at the bottom of page 1, the old definition is simply 2 sentences. It's the formula for measuring building heights. I suggest that your revision does the same. Please clarify and define a formula to be simple and understandable to all. Then move on to CBD1, or do CBD1 first, and then do your formula. I suggest any specific dimension or height or issue go into CBD1, and I will say why in a minute. Please note at the top of page 2, I circled the words, shall be as set forth in 1739. This phrase is very important. It needs to be included. It's not included in the revision. This statement defers to the individual districts in 1739. It gives the districts the power. And they all have varied building heights and requirements. This allows the individual district requirements to dominate. As this ordinance is written, please refer to page 3, This version is not a simple definition. In my opinion, it's convoluted and took all I have to try and understand it. Please explain to the public what this means and consider it carefully. Actually, this ordinance would apply to the, as written, would apply to the entire city, every building, unless you defer to the district state as stated above. Think about this. If you leave it like this, when you are called to redevelop St. John's Golf Course or the gun club when you win in court, are you going to allow underground parking and additional height in those zoning districts? Or in any zoning district? This would allow that. What is the proposed finished grade? Who is the proposer? This is opaque and vague. Are you changing the formula for all districts or just CBD1? This distinction needs to be made clear. The second paragraph in the revision starts with the word exemption. I would suggest you move this paragraph to CBD1 and define the unclear wording. Are underground garage entrances going to be allowed on any street or only side streets and alleys? Street access needs to be defined. What defines and determines first floor elevation? Does presented wording allow an unintentional extra 10 feet of height if the parking is not completely underground and the facade is raised? Does this wording exempt a first level of parking, thereby raising building height to 65 feet? I don't know, and I cannot say for certain. Are you going to allow garage entrances for underground parking on any street? Arterial streets? Collector streets? Are you going to slow the traffic and lose street parking on Genesee, Milwaukee, Main Street? Where do the garage entrances have to be? And finally, is it possible if you add a roof, 10 or 15 feet with a pitched or gabled roof is added, and it contains unrestricted convertible attic space for future use? You are right back where you started, 75 to 80 feet, 5 stories. That's why it's so important. This is the way it appears to me. I could be wrong. I'm hoping you'll explain it to me tonight. This ordinance as presented does not address any of these questions I've raised, and I'm asking for clarification and the time for you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Who else would like to speak to public hearing number 2? Anybody else like to speak to public hearing number 2? Come on up, Mr. Wisher.
Bill Wisher, S231 Latin Peak Road. And it's really short and sweet. Both on your public hearing proposed,
Excuse me, we can't hear you.
well, I don't hear anything here either. Do I have to talk?
That's good.
I can hear you.
Well, the proposed ordinances, the word that comes to mind is gobbledygook. You really need to edit it so anybody can understand it, and both of them are in a world of hurt. You need to go straighten them out, and that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you for your comments. Okay, seeing no other comments for public hearing number 2, public hearing number 2 is now closed. Moving on to item 1, approve planning commission minutes of August 28th, 2019 meeting. Is there such a motion?
So move. Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
So Ed made the motion.
No.
Oh, Jim made the motion? Okay.
Yep.
And Dan seconded it?
Yep.
Okay, got it. All right. Any, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Item number 2, City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to subject on the consent agenda. Any citizens' comments for items on the consent agenda? Seeing none?
No,
cis-
what? No.
Oh,
No.
consent agenda? Oh, okay,
Yes.
go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Did
the
you say-
consent.
Oh, I'm sorry. What you said, citizens. Isn't citizens' comments coming next?
No, consent.
I'm sorry. Jump
No
the gun.
worries. No
Jump the
worries.
gun.
Oh, we're good. Seeing no citizens' comments for the consent agenda, they're now closed. I'd like to pull 3E from the consent agenda. Is there a motion on any of the other items?
Motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, and D.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? One nay? Okay, one nay. Abstentions? No abstentions. Okay, 3E. Just kind of an update to this. The city council actually had a meeting at their last meeting, and they approved the location of 2 Ice Age trail signs, one on Highway 83 and one on Cushing Park Road, which was following the head nod suggestion from the Planning Commission at the time that if we were to allow those signs, since we didn't want them on the entrance signs, that maybe we should put them where the path crossed the roads, right? So that's the direction we took. Met with the Ice Age Trail people as well. They were in concurrence that those locations would be sufficient, and the Planning Commission approved those signs in those locations. So, the council, sorry. And so there's a couple temporary signs that have been put up while we were trying to figure out how to comply with this requirement that we had by contract to have 2 signs. So I'm asking somebody to make a motion, and we can discuss it, whatever, to remove the 2 temporary signs on Highway C as the new signs discussed with the board of the Ice Age Trail are in the process of going up.
I'll make a motion.
Make a motion,
Yeah, make a motion to remove the temporary signs.
the 2 temporary signs? Okay, is there a second?
So is
Okay.
that also
Discussion.
to approve?
Nope,
Oh,
Just
okay.
to remove.
Okay.
just to remove.
All right.
And who seconded?
Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, now we'll move on to 4, City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to items on or off the agenda. Laura?
I'll be reading a citizen's letter that was sent to me. Her name is Danielle Henry. I don't have her address, though. She writes, "Thank you for your feedback and passionate interest in the city." Oh, that's from you, the mayor. September 7th, 2019, she wrote this. "I'm greatly disturbed this week when I pulled in with my kids to pick up dinner from Asian Kitchen. As I was preparing to get out of my car, my 9-year-old asked me, 'Mom, what is CBD and what is vape?' I look up and see opening soon with a pot leaf on the window of the store in front of me. My oldest started her first year at Arrowhead, and I just had to sit through a mandatory parents' meeting that basically told us the biggest growing issue at the high school has been vaping. Also, with all the emerging data showing the detrimental health effects of vaping, I'm appalled that Delafield would approve this right in our backyard. I have been an active member in this community, and I have always believed that a low interest by the public in the day-to-day of leaders is a sign that they trust you and what you are doing. Well, I have my attention now. Well, you have my attention now, excuse me. I do believe this is a responsible decision and one that was probably purely a financial decision instead of what it is best for the welfare of our community. Shame on the Planning Commission. I hope you will listen to the community when we tell you this is not something we want here. Danielle Henry. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other citizens' comments for items on or off the agenda? Lynn, come on up. I called Lynn.
Oh, Lynn?
Yep.
She's pretty here.
Thank you.
You got that one?
Got that one.
Lynn Holton, 485 Lillian Court, Delafield. This is pertaining to Ordinance 1739, which was revised in your e-packet, but it's not on the agenda as a public hearing because you have not authorized a public hearing yet. Again, it is not noted as an action item, and so I assume no action can be taken tonight. With all three of these ordinances presented to you tonight, you have to consider them as a whole. They contain cumulative effects on each other. I'm going to point you to item C on the revised edition. It's on page 1. No building shall exceed 3 floors above grade. What is grade? In the 3 ordinances you have in front of you tonight, we have seen first floor elevation in 1715, proposed finished grade in 1724, and grade and existing grade in this one, 1739. Is existing grade first floor elevation? Is proposed finished grade the same as existing grade? Then what is grade? Do you understand the public's confusion? And I hope we're not the only ones that are confused. Which is it? Where is your starting point? Nail it down, and if specific to a zoning district, put it in the zoning district. The 3 ordinances are not consistent in their language and lack description, thereby confusing and misleading. Now I refer to item II. I believe Commissioner Jasinski requested a consideration of arterial streets being added. And my last note is that any restrictions to height, attic use, or other conditions you create specific to CBD1 should be placed in this ordinance and not in the rest of the zoning code. That being said, different subject, a couple of different points. Unfortunately, a limited hotel is not on the agenda, and I assume it cannot be discussed tonight. There is a limited hospital referred to on the agenda for discussion. In regards to the A1 and B5, it's going to be a complicated issue that not only requires comprehensive plan amendments, it requires the city or Delhart to apply to Sewer Pact to extend the sewer service area to include this A1 parcel. These 2 issues need to be resolved first, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wisher, you are next.
You are staring off into space. Your eyes have glazed over. Let's see if you can hear me this time. This is in Bill Wisher. That's 231 Latin Peak Road, an adjacent landowner to the parcels that are being proposed. This is in reference to your agenda item 8B. And right now it says reports to officials, proposed public hearings on next month's agenda. Shouldn't this not be listed under zoning and ordinance revisions instead of planning? But going along with the agenda here, planning points 1 and 2. Point 1, rezoning of parcel DELC 0799.983 of approximately 3.9 acres. This is not a simple rezoning from A1 to B5. As per the request by the developer, which is in your handout packet, this parcel, the following request by the developer, this parcel really become what is closer to be a B6 PUD zoning due to the assisted living and motel inclusion. We need to exercise due diligence in examining this request before going ahead with this rezoning. And then the other pregnant question is, how will this rezoning affect the surrounding A1 properties, particularly to the south. Point 2, and Lynn just referred to this, the request for amending the B5 zoning code as listed in the agenda is not what the developer is requesting in their letter. So this item is, as listed in the agenda, is bogus. This alone precludes any possible discussion of this point by the Plan Commission this meeting until this is corrected, and precludes any hearing next month. The developer is requesting discussion on a possible amendment to the B5 zoning code to allow a motel, which is not allowed in the current code. This is not anywhere close to limited hospital usage as listed in this agenda. The attached documents do, however, reflect the developer's desire for a motel amendment to the B5 zoning, and as well as confirmed by Dupler's memorandum. Frankly, this indicates a serious lapse in communication in this agenda, for which I thank you for your time.
Great, thank you for your comments. Anyone else like to speak to anything on or off the agenda? Anyone else? Seeing none, citizens' comments are now closed. We'll move on to number 5, unfinished business, which we have none. So we'll move on to 6A, new business. DELC 0807.978.010 400 Austin Circle, Delafield, owner applicant, Purple Dog Real Estate Investment. Applicant seeks approval of a business plan of operation and site plan for Purple Dog Storage, an outdoor storage facility. Hours of operation from 8 a.m. to 4:30. Do we have the applicant here for this agenda item? Do we have the applicant here? Oh, that's a problem.
Can't move.
Any reason why we would think the applicant wouldn't be here?
No. No, it's up to your discretion whether or not you want to discuss it or put the whole thing off.
So what's better, a motion to deny or a motion to postpone?
Again, that's up to your discretion.
Deny, they probably have to pay the fee again. Postpone up to one meeting, they probably wouldn't have to pay the fee again.
My report and recommendation of the Plan Commission was not to take action on this, or at least approve it contingent on further action to approve a CS on the combined lots. So perhaps the applicant elected not to come this evening, assuming that we would not be taking final action. I can't speak
Roger,
to
we
that.
can't hear you.
Can you move your microphone to the other side where the
Is that
button
better?
is? Move it to it, right over here, by your button. There you
Is that
go.
better?
Okay.
Are you on?
Yeah, when he held it closer, I could hear him.
How about now? How about now?
Oh, that's, okay.
I just shouted out.
Yeah, I usually do.
Use hands.
It's working.
It's
I
working.
think it's fine.
Speak a little louder.
Okay. The applicant is not here this evening. I do not have an answer for that. However, my recommendation to the Plan Commission was not to take final action on the proposed business plan of operation, but rather ask them to return next month with a certified survey map combining both of their parcels. As is, they are proposing to have an outdoor storage for marine vehicles and equipment. However, that is an ancillary use. And on that lot, they don't have a primary use. The solution is to combine both of the lots so that the existing building becomes a primary use, and this is ancillary to the principal use. If based on your recommendation or consent, they can return next month with a application to combine the lots via CSM.
Cleanest thing to do is just deny it. That's the cleanest.
Which is fine, then they just resubmit a revised business plan of operation in association with their CSM.
Or we could move it to next month.
And they may or may not show, they may or may not get their documents together.
I see what you're getting at.
I think from a matter of policy, what we're trying to do, at least my experience here and also other commissions I'm involved in, it's the duty of the applicant to show up or give notice.
Yeah.
Failure to give notice or to show up to at least, we're taking our time to listen to them. They have the courtesy to at least notify us absent some justifiable reason. So I'm inclined normally to just deny it. On the other hand, what you've said from an equitable standpoint, if they're planning to come next month, was there some mistaken information?
We don't know that.
We don't know.
We don't
That's
know
my
that.
point.
Roger just suggested that as a possible course of action. And
Right.
maybe the applicant didn't show because, I mean, we're guessing, right?
I know.
We're just guessing.
That's why I say the policy's a good one to deny if they don't show up and don't give notice.
Is there a
Is that your
motion?
motion?
That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Motion to deny, and there's a second. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention passes. All right, we'll move on to 6B. DELC 0734.989, DELC 0735.998, and DELC 7035.999. 4024 Nagawicca Road, Delafield, owner University Lake School, applicant MSI General. Julie Mitchell, applicant seeks preliminary feedback regarding an amended conditional use permit to accommodate a nature study center on campus. Is Julie or some other representative here? Great, if you could just state your name and address, and then we'll let Roger give a little overview.
I am Julie Mitchell, and I live at West 333 North 4189 Mertens Drive in Nashotah, but I represent ULS tonight.
Great. Can you give us an overview, Roger?
Sure, this is a cabin in the woods.
cabin
It's
in
not
the
much
woods.
more than that. The intent here is to provide an outdoor or a remote learning center. It will not have any utilities to it. It's on post footings. It's been sensitively situated in the landscape, so it's not removing any quality trees. It's within reasonable walking distance from the school. I would encourage your consideration to move this on to public hearing. Because the school is governed by a conditional use, we need to conduct a public hearing before taking any action. And this is just a simple site plan with an amended conditional use accordingly.
The windows in there, they're open, I'm assuming.
Yeah, there's no glass.
There's no glass in it?
It opens up and latches shut.
Okay, and the shutters are, okay, good.
Old-fashioned barn.
Okay, that's what I was gathering by looking at it. How far off the school is it approximately?
It's off the parking lot on the northeast side. It's about 50 feet through the little path through the woods, and there's some scrubby trees and a couple of choke cherries. But and they're using the area right now. They kind of have tarps around the area, but they'd like to use it to study nature. It's on a really flat area of the property too.
That was another question of any concern for flooding in that area.
No, we picked a nice flat spot.
Okay, good.
We will have a ramp for ADA access.
Do you have any kind of path or trail to get to it from?
There's just a walking path right now to it, but I mean, we could.
Like
put down-
mulch or something?
It would be a mulch situation, yeah.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, we need a motion to schedule a public hearing.
I'll move to schedule public hearing for this item.
Second.
Thank you, Ed, for the second.
Great.
Thank you, Jim, for the second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, number 7, zoning and ordinance revision. 7A, text amendment to repeal and recreate portions of 17.24 definition regarding floor area, basement, average improved slope, unimproved slope, and building height. Roger.
This has been on the agenda, I believe, 3 consecutive months now. The public hearing was conducted last month. We've modified it a number of times. This incorporates a number of things that we have been discussing, not only the building height, but also the basement modifications and how we define the slopes that contribute to that. And of course, what prompted most of this discussion was concern over floor area and how residential buildings were taking advantage of of unclear issues, unclear formulas in our current code. So we believe we've attended to all of the critical information and ask for your consideration to pass this on to council with any modifications you may request at this time.
I'm a little confused. Can you hear me? Hear me?
I can hear you.
I was a little confused by this because of the 1724 being like definitions. And a lot of this reads like an ordinance. And I wonder why you have to have all of this in here. I know that parts of it, there, it does talk about building heights, it does talk about floor area, but in 1724, there is nothing about slope. That is another ordinance.
I'm not sure I understand your question, Laura.
Yeah.
1724 is all the definitions, okay, of height, building inspector, building principal, building utilities. It goes on for pages and pages, okay? Are parts of this going to replace building height that's in the definition of 1724?
Yes, that's an intent.
Okay. The basement part is not within 1724, so that's going to be added to it?
No, it's replacing an existing definition of basement.
Is it? Because I didn't see, I must have missed that. The one that was not in there is slope.
Correct, and that's why we've
Yeah.
created the new interpretation of average improved slope, because we specifically refer to that in order to measure subterranean floor area. So that is a new definition.
Okay. The other thing is on the floor area, when it says usable attic space providing structural headroom of 5 feet or more. When you say usable, that to me tells me that in time that this space could be possibly used as another floor to the building. All they'd need is dormers.
That's true, and that's why it'll be required to be included as floor area, whether you finish it or not.
Right, so you can't add potential space that's not counted in the math to figure out the total floor area ratio, right? So we're counting that. If you have, that meets that definition, it's counted in the math.
So if it's 55 feet and you have a pitch roof,
Don't
Well,
confuse issues here.
that's a separate,
well, that's how I'm
Totally
looking at it. I'm thinking,
separate.
because it says attic space. So I'm assuming it's something that's got a headroom of at least 5 feet. Okay?
yeah, if it
They
has,
could turn that into another living space, office space.
Only for extremely short people. Because they would
But
have
a
to come
huge
to,
dormer
they'd
could
have to
solve
come to
that
Scott for a
problem.
building, permit. They'd have to come to Scott for a building permit in that case.
And so rooms, residential or commercial rooms with a ceiling height of 5 feet are not occupiable in the commercial building code, and they're not habitable in the residential code.
My house has, my attic in my house, and I have a ranch, a big old ranch. I can stand in it.
Then
If I put dormers, I can actually turn it into living space.
But if you can stand in it, it must count towards floor area.
Okay. I'm a little afraid of this because of the CBD one. If we allow that space above what is that 55 feet, and somebody has a gabled roof, I could see another space being used. How are you going to kind of make sure that that space is not used?
Because anyone hoping to accomplish that would have to come to Scott. That's structural alteration of an existing structure, and he cannot approve it.
Roger, do we have FAR in CBD 1? I believe we do not.
No, we do not, because there's no limitation to it, or there's no
Correct.
minimum, maximum.
So
it's legitimate that some of these changes that we're making, while they may appear that they are related to one another, in reality they're not, right? But a lot of the words are the same, and definitions. I agree. I mean, when you're looking at it just in this context, right?
confusing.
It gets a little confusing, but when you look at it in its entirety and it's being interpreted to an applicant, I think it's very clear.
The one in here that says exception, the additional building height on a street-facing facade shall be allowed to facilitate access to underground parking. A maximum of 10 feet below the first floor elevation may be permitted for up to 15% of the building. I'm wondering why that's here and not just in the CBD one, because that's where we want to put it,
Because we
right?
want that to apply to all districts regardless.
Oh, okay. Okay. Other than what I pointed out on some of the words in the document that I would like to see changed?
Were they misspellings?
No, not misspellings. It's just that the state is, in my handbook, they're saying that we should write things at an 8th grade level, which is sad to me, but that's what it is. And some of the words in here, I felt one of them was misspelled, could be made easier, very simple. And
You want to take a crack at that now?
I already gave Roger a copy.
Give that back.
Yeah.
I gave it back to you.
Okay, I will give it back to you. I don't know where it is right now.
All but one of the comments that Laura had are the elements of the city attorney's form.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we'll have to have him modify that or approve modification before it goes to council.
I'll give it to you after the meeting.
Okay.
I have one question related to what Laura just said, just for clarification, maybe for her benefit as well as the rest of us. That exception under this proposal, additional building height on a street-facing facade and so forth, that applies across the board to any building. It's not limited to this particular CBD one, right?
Correct.
Okay, and that doesn't increase the maximum height that we're contemplating on the 55 feet.
No.
does it?
it does not.
That's why I want to.
It's there on purpose so that it doesn't.
That's what I thought, but she had asked that question. I want to make
Yeah.
sure that was clear.
Yeah.
Scott.
I have one question under building height. And some of this talk of grades does get confusing, but it's the last sentence. Exposed foundation on facades not facing the street below the building base grade. What is building base grade? I understand some of the other grades on this, in these definitions, but are you talking like the first floor level?
Essentially, yeah, that's first floor level. That would be the highest grade at the foundation. In other words, it would be 6 inches below for the finished floor elevation.
So you're talking about when you're averaging the high and the low, when you talk building base grade, you're talking about that high point?
Correct.
Yeah, that might be defined a little better.
Yeah, right. I agree.
Well, what was the word you just used there? Do we just strike base grade and put those words in place of it?
You want me to repeat it? It's the high point of the
highest
grade
grade point.
used in the averaging formula.
Dave, does
The
that
highest grade point?
Or you could say, the highest grade point.
Let's keep it simple.
highest grade point
At the foundation.
at foundation?
Yes.
Mr. Building Inspector, does that work for you?
Sure.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion on this item? Anybody want to make a motion?
And the motion is to recommend to council with the stated revisions this evening.
Could we see the finished product next month?
Well, we just
It's
changed.
going to be rewritten, so we should see.
You'll see it in the council packet, but basically we're just deleting the words base grade under building height in the definition section, and we're replacing with highest grade point at foundation. So that's the only change.
Instead of me waiting for common council, could we get that emailed to us?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I'll make a motion to approve with revised wordage and move on to council
Recommend to council?
for approval.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you. Ed? Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay. Move on to the next item, which is 7B, text amendment to repeal and recreate 17.39.7 through 17.39.15 regarding residential FAR. Go, if you'd help us there, Roger?
Sure, I think the key word here is residential. Since we have modified how we are calculating the floor area in residential homes as well as all buildings, we don't want to unduly limit the construction of home floor area ratio. So as a result, we have increased the allowable floor area ratios for each of the individual residential districts. And the proposed ordinance runs through those. This is consistent with the information provided last month, which was a table that identified all of those elements. And again, just as before, this is a recommendation to council with any of your revisions requested this evening.
So this is basically what we saw last time, just the city attorney put it into it, and you put it into a format that complies with the code.
A format that's appropriate for action as a ordinance revision.
Better said. So nothing new here.
So what
Same
we-
as we talked about before, just format change.
So only thing that changed in here was the dimension, the allowable.
The percentages.
Yeah, percentages.
And for the most part, they were increased 25 to 30% in that range.
Which is what we discussed, but sometimes in rounding, it actually had to be a little different percentage just because, you know.
I would have a motion.
Looking for a motion to approve and recommend to
Move
council.
to approve under section 7B, text amendments to repeal and recreate 17.39(7) through 17.39(15) regarding residential FAR caps. And recommend to council.
Thank you. And Dave, second. All right, is there any additional discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Thank you very much. One more step for FAR. Two more steps for FAR. Okay, 7C, text amendment to repeal and recreate 17.3918L CBD1 district regarding maximum building height, number of floors, and restrictions imposed on the fourth floor. Roger?
Hang on, I gotta get it up here on the screen. Okay, again, this is something we've already conducted a public hearing on. This is an item that we've been deliberating for some time, and for the most part, this was initiated by consideration of the proposed Hendricks building. The CBD1 district is proposed to be modified in regards to building height, and of course, that will be measured as we just had discussed in regards to the modified ordinance in that regard. It will also allow for an increased 10 foot of height in accessory buildings. This will allow for a fourth floor, but with restrictions. And those restrictions would be that they have to provide parking spaces. In addition to residential spaces, you are required to have 2 residential spaces per unit. And they are required to produce those parking spaces at a ratio of 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet based on the largest floor area, regardless of which floor it is. So if the fourth floor is actually smaller than the other floors, we want 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of the largest floor. In addition, the minimum building setback for all collector streets, and thank you, Lynn, for pointing out, we want to say arterial streets as well here, Genesee, Milwaukee, Main, and Wells Street, should be no less than 20 feet, and that is consistent with what we discussed last month.
Roger, just for clarification on what you just said, it should say minimum building setback from all collector and arterial streets?
And arterial streets.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing that I, not crazy too crazy about is item A. I like the way we did it before with the 45-55. It would be this time. The last time was 35-45. I kind of like that better because then someone who comes in goes, oh, if I only build it 45 feet, I don't have to have the setback. Where with 55, when you see 45-55, they know that with that 55, they're going to have more of a setback or have a setback.
No, the setback is not dependent on the building height, it's dependent on the fourth floor.
Fourth floor,
Yeah.
okay.
So
All right.
we kind of got rid, while that applies in all other districts, it doesn't apply in CBD 1. Right, there's a flat height, 55 feet. Right,
There's no-
and you only have to, it's a 0 setback
Okay. So
on
you're
all sides
eliminating-
except for collector and arterial
Okay.
streets.
So what you're eliminating then is that 45 feet that they wouldn't have, didn't have to have a setback for if they only did 45 feet? Because before we had this 35-45. 45 you had to have the setback. 35 you didn't.
You're talking about the additional height by increasing the setback.
Right.
Correct.
Where by saying 55 feet now, you're not telling them that at 45 feet you wouldn't have to have that setback.
We are allowing them to do 0 lot line on non-collector streets.
Which is
So-
what the current code says.
No, the current code says above 45 you have to provide, or above 35 you have to provide additional.
Right.
However-
That's why I like the 45-55 because it tells them, okay, if you go 55, then you have to have this and this and this. Where at 45 you don't. Correct?
Again, it's fourth floor, it's not height.
I'm just looking at from, if I came in to get I'm going to do a development. And if I see 45-55, I'm going to ask. And if you tell me at 45 feet, I don't have to have this, this, and this. But at 55, I do. That's how it was written before. And I like that better because it gives people an opportunity to see that if they don't go 55, they don't have to jump through all these other hoops.
Okay, if I'm a builder and I propose a building height of 42 feet, and I make it 3 floors, I can put that right on the property line. And I do not have to respect the 20-foot setback.
Right.
We got a lot of those downtown.
Right. But if it goes to 55 feet and it's still 3 floors, then I think it becomes an issue of aesthetics.
Right.
Who's going to do a 16-foot floor for 3 floor heights? And the Plan Commission actually has more control over aesthetics.
Okay, I see what you're saying. All right, just asking.
No, they're good questions.
Yeah.
I just have,
There's no bad question.
If you guys don't understand it, it's no good.
Yeah.
I think because of the kind of the history of this matter and also because it kind of grew out of the Hendricks project, I think it would just be good to clarify, Roger, if you could, how this ordinance now that we're considering here to approve applies to the building. Compare the 2 buildings, the bigger buildings downtown, just so the public understands this a little bit. The Delafield Square and this proposed ordinance, how that all fits in. Is it pretty comparable to what is at the Delafield Square, or is it taking it to another level? Could you just explain that? Because I think that's been a point of controversy.
It's pretty darn comparable. I mean, the Delafield Square would fit into this with the exception that on the north side, I think they're probably at 18 feet off of Main Street.
But
So it's just the setback, not necessarily the height.
right, the height would fit in.
Yeah.
You know, it's a minor thing, but it makes all, if this change is approved, it makes everything that's currently in CBD 1, plus most of the things that the Hendricks building requested, fit within the rules, right? Right, there's one wall, they'd have to move back 8 feet, and they've communicated with, staff that they would be okay with doing that.
And that's all understood about the setback as well, then you're talking about the
Yep.
20 feet all around
Yep.
on the collector streets, which
Yep.
included the addition of, I believe it is Main Street that we didn't have before. This one covers Main Street.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And
Yes.
Milwaukee Street and all the collector
Yes.
notes.
Yep.
area.
Yeah, and just for everyone's knowledge, I think there's only 2 streets in CBD 1
That we're not listing.
that we're
I
not
believe
listing,
it.
and that's
Doppler,
Dopkins
Hopkins,
and Oneida.
And the reason Dopkins wasn't considered was why?
You got nothing but a parking lot across the street, so it's not infringing on any neighboring properties.
And with an Oneida?
They're all recently redone buildings, and it might be a number of years before there's any other construction over there.
So there's no construction contemplated on either of those streets that would interfere with this ordinance?
Correct.
Okay. And under the other zoning code 1715 that you've indicated is a subject of our discussion, which specifically talks about increases that are permitted, does not apply to the CBD one.
That's the next item on the agenda. We'll be
So
asking
just
you-
so we understand, these are to be consistent and read in harmony together. All we're talking about right now is CBD1 for purposes of the height as compared to 1715-3, which is not CBD1.
Correct.
That allows for increases, this one doesn't.
Correct.
That's what I want to clarify.
Yep. Good discussion. Ready for a motion?
Just one last question. On item C, no building may exceed 3 floors above grade. Should we specify which grade? Finished grade, I would assume.
Good catch. Good catch.
Which one would you like? Finished grade, proposed grade, unimproved slope?
Well, it really is proposed, right? We
Yeah,
don't wait
it
for
is.
them
It's
to build
proposed.
it and then say, oh, you're too high. So
Yeah.
it's a
It's gotta be
plan
proposed.
that's coming to you that's proposed finished grade.
Scott, does the word proposed make sense to you?
It does in this case because all site plans for commercial building sites have to be reviewed and approved by Plan Commission. So we would review the proposed grading plan.
So should we put proposed in there?
I've already written it in.
Oh, good.
Let's say it's in.
Well, in the motion, we should, with noted correction of adding the word proposed.
Yeah.
Grade.
We haven't set the motion yet, have we?
And arterial.
I just have one other question of Roger.
Yes.
On the exception where it says parking spaces are provided at or below existing grade, we're talking about underground?
Correct, but at grade, that's surface
Either
parking.
way.
Yeah, they can
But
put surface parking.
At below meaning underground, at surface?
Correct.
Just so everybody understands that. Okay, that answers my
I have a
question.
question.
on that.
What if they decide to put a parking at ground level and everything else above it, where they don't break into the surface of the
They can't get a fourth floor.
So, I just want to know, because I want to know how that's going to work. Okay.
And also, all of this is, past this, the next consideration, all of this is subject to the conditional use criteria, which we'll deal with later. Correct?
Sure, unique to Hendricks, but this would be, this
No,
once
but
you
as
take
far
action,
as
this
Changing
applies to
all of
properties.
CBD1, Hendricks is certainly a reference point, and the existing Delafield Square is a reference point, but we're talking about the whole district.
Right. No, these were the triggering events to get it done, so
Yeah.
just want to make sure that's preserved there down the road.
Okay. Ed, looks like you have a motion on your lips.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the text amendments that in line C to include the word proposed and in line I to include arterial streets to municipal code 17.39 parens 18 parens L and to recommend to council.
Second.
Is there a second? Dave seconds. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay. Now we will move on to 7D, text amendment to repeal and recreate 17.153 regarding increased building height.
Okay, the only change on this proposed ordinance is the last line here that says, exception, an increase in building height above the first floor elevation shall not be permitted in the CBD1 district. And this is to ensure that there's no miscommunication. Even though that we are allowing increased height in other zoning districts, we have no intent of allowing additional height in the CBD1.
Right, about 55 feet. I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Dave.
Second.
Second by Ed. Okay, any additional discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. And that was to recommend to council, right?
That's what I heard.
Recommend to
Yes.
council.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to 8A, reports of city officials. Clerk, Planning Commission meeting dates and deadlines. Next meeting is October 30th. Meeting submittal deadline is October 15th. Public hearing submittal deadline is September 30th. Number 2, correspondence. Hopefully you saw this earlier. Correspondence from District 7 Alderperson Tim Eicher stating he is in favor of the proposed amendments to CBD 1 height zoning and height definitions. Okay, 8B, planner, discussion regarding amending the comprehensive plan to change the architectural parcel of the C and 94 parcels DELC 0799.983-224 South Genesee Street to be consistent with the balance of the Exonia Bank-owned property, office land use designation, and rezoned according to B5 district. Roger?
This is only discussion this evening, but the purpose of this discussion is to ascertain the Plan Commission's predisposition or direction for staff in regards to making modifications to the comprehensive plan and rezoning for the piece of property that's in the southwest corner of the proposed C and I-94 property. I think we're all aware of which one that is. We've had 3 consecutive applications and discussions with developers dating back as far as 15 years or more regarding conversion of that property into usable space that's consistent with the balance of the property. It's all owned by one owner. It's very practical to assume that that 5-acre A1 parcel should be the same as the rest of the B5 property. Currently, it is identified that one parcel is identified as agricultural on the comprehensive plan, where the balance of the property is identified as office. I think it is in the city's best interest because whether or not this current developer goes forward, we're going to have someone coming in and ask for the exact same thing in the future steps. So I think it's in the city's best interest. We should consider making that change and doing what we can to prepare that property for the proper development planning, because in my opinion, it's going to happen. Eventually, it's going to happen. Part of planning is anticipating those elements and acting accordingly, and I think the city should be more proactive than reactive in this regard.
And it's been, as Roger said, it's been discussed many, many times, and it's something we've always gone past as we've looked at the developments, assuming this change would be made, and it'd be nice to just get it done.
Is it one lot with 2 different zoning on it?
No, it's one lot with
One lot.
one zoning and one land use.
There was a house on it one time. There was a residence
It's
on it.
one big 27-acre
It's
lot.
all owned by the
No.
same
One that burned
people.
down?
It's a 5-acre lot.
Yes.
So
I
there's a
think
5-acre lot with one
there
zoning,
was the-
22-acre lot with
the one on
another, but they're
Indian
all
Springs,
owned by
but this
one.
is on
Rock River
City.
Correct.
Properties.
Yes.
And they've been
residence.
owned by the same people for a long time. And we're just, the suggestion is to change the existing A1 to the B5 so it matches everything else in the parcel.
Well, I think this, as you point out, has been discussed almost ad nauseum on 3 or 4 different occasions over the time I've been on this commission. And it is time to move forward on this, and I would encourage, based upon your report and how it was presented by the developer last meeting, which I thought was very professional and well done, but I think that will be up to them to decide what they do once we do approve this, if we do. And I don't think it's inconsistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan when you have to take steps to make a balance between preserving the status quo and moving forward. This one, we've lost some opportunities, I think, in the past. We don't want to have that happen again. So I'm, at this point, favorably impressed to the extent that I would certainly consider in the future supporting it.
I believe it's the reason why too also that they want to change it is because that's where the road is going to come out. I believe that's where the road from the inner workings of this.
Yeah, it's
are
either
gonna
on it
come
or
out.
very close. I don't
Yeah.
recall exactly, but
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Right,
But regardless if it's this developer or another one,
yeah.
Right.
and that road might not change, we don't know.
Yeah, and actually, with the first master plan, which I was at, I know I'm aging myself, that was proposed back then to bring, that's why Tomahawk Trail is there, was to swing it south and come out on C.
Yeah.
So,
Because fixing that problem on Indian Springs Drive is certainly something that's definitely a benefit, right? So is there a motion to schedule this for a public hearing, or?
Before you make that motion, I would just like to explain or ask if there's anything that you would like to see additional information to help you make an informed decision, let me know what it is.
Well, I think once this, if we pass this, this motion, I think the developer will be providing you with an ongoing update as to what they're going to do, which you obviously can share with us, and they will be here again, given what I saw of them in the past, and I think only time will tell. But at this point, I think we should all feel free to bring that information that we want requested from Roger as it develops.
You make a good point. This is one step in a long process with lots of discussion.
Yeah, for the right reason.
Yeah.
Motion to move this item to a public hearing, the amended comprehensive plan and rezoning for Delafield 0799.983.
Second.
I'm sorry, who was the second? Bob? Okay, any further discussion?
That only applies to section B1 on our planner on the agenda, correct? We haven't got to the hotel yet.
Correct.
Right.
Thank you.
The hospital.
Okay. Don't jump the gun. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, Roger, fall on your sword.
Okay, I have a mental defect in that I, for some reason, every correspondence I've shared with the mayor and staff and all of you, I am reversing hospital and hotel.
I do the
can't
same
hardly
thing.
say it.
I do the same thing.
So anyway,
I wanted him to write it on his arm.
Is there an underlying issue we're not aware of?
With a Sharpie.
With a Sharpie.
could you recommend a specialist to me?
We have therapy for that.
So anyway, this is a little bit different than the last discussion in that this was specifically requested of the developer in order to pave the way for their proposed development agenda. In our current B5 zoning district, we do not allow for hotels. However, the point I think is worth noting is that if this ordinance was written more than 30 years ago, because there have been changes in the industry and the expectations in the medical community, if we were writing this ordinance today for a new zoning district, we would probably be including hotels because that's just the way modern service of medical campuses is. They are requesting for our consideration to include hotels that are limited, that would not have your typical restaurant and bar or banquet facilities or convention opportunities, but rather just be limited lodging, continental breakfast, maybe an office room, but that would be it. So it's up to your discretion whether you want to pull the trigger on that and modify the ordinance in preparation for this developer or any future developer, or the other option is the city doesn't have to take action on it and allow the developer to make that part of their request. Safeguard in that specific instance is that we can, if there's any apprehension about making this change now, we can put that responsibility to request and make it part of their application of the developer, in which case any site plans approval would have to be contingent on modifying the ordinance, which is pretty much what we've done with Hendricks. So it's up to you, and your recommendation, of course, will go to council. Do you want to change the ordinance to allow for hotels now, or do you want to wait for the applicant's application?
So I think both are appropriate, right? But I think if we did it separately, we could have an open discussion on just that topic. I think that's better for the public to be able to participate in as opposed to something that's part of a larger picture. We'll be talking about a lot of things. And I'd like to make sure that if we choose that path, then when we talk about adding hotel, we add very specific qualifiers, because I think there's a big concern from the neighbors that the other B5 zoning in the area not be able to have a hotel. So by saying a hotel in this district is only approvable if it's part of a medical campus, and some of the things that Roger said, and anything else that we want to add to it. So it makes it, restricted to this site and can't be translated to the other B5 that's there. I just think it's worthy of its own discussion.
I have being a resident of Indian Spring Drive, I would not want to see a hotel go on that other 5 acres.
Right.
Is there a way we can, without changing the ordinance to include hotels, create an exception for them?
But where do you stop with the exceptions?
Well, that's always up to us to approve an
Right,
exception.
and that's-
But if it's ordinance, you can't stop it.
So that would probably, if you want to treat it as an exception, I'd say you'd want to do it as part of the overall plan, as Roger's suggesting, as alternative, whatever, pick
Yeah, 'cause
one or two. But if you do it independently, I think we can specifically address in open daylight that the intent is that we put qualifiers on so that other B5 cannot get a hotel.
B5 does not have a conditional use, 0. I'm sorry. B5 does not have a conditional use in it. And I have Hamas's letter here from 2017, 5 pages long, that discusses all of this. Anything you put in there has to be compatible with the underlying zoning.
Right.
And you have to consider the area. This area is a very long established residential area. A hotel is actually a B6 mixed use commercial. And I know that from my neighbors call me all the time. They are totally opposed to that because they feel that if you let one thing in, it's a slippery slope because we still have land left to develop. So I'm just the errand boy here telling you what
Right.
I'm told.
Go ahead.
Right, so.
My one neighbor that's next to this has very young children, and their fear also is that because it's a hotel and you have these big Harley get-togethers and that, it's one thing to hear them on the freeway, it's quite another to hear them right in your backyard. It's the traffic, because we only have one road in or out.
Yeah. So I think at the last planning commission meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, there was kind of a consensus that a hotel could have a fit. And I guess I'd like to begin that public discussion of what type of hotel, you can limit the number of floors, you can limit the number of rooms. I mean, you can do all of that by looking at when you add it to the B5 zoning. To go to B6 opens up other opportunities, right? Nobody, I don't think, you weren't saying you want that, right?
I'm saying that a hotel belongs in the B6, mixed-use commercial.
Okay.
That's our zoning right now.
Yeah.
And by putting it there, you're going to be de facto changing the zoning.
Yeah.
And you want to open a real can of worms.
No, I don't think
okay.
anybody's suggesting B6.
Right.
I think the only thing being suggested is do it as part of the development or do it as a standalone entity to simply modify the existing B5 to be assured that it can't be, copied over to the only other existing B5 in the city, which is adjacent to there.
It is the only B5 in the city.
No, there's one
And-
other, but
Oh,
it's
is there
really,
another?
there's a really small area.
The other thing is that in their presentation letter, it said assisted living hotel possible. So that tells me that they already knew that this was not within the zoning. We will give, as we stated, my neighbors would give them the assisted living, which is not within that zoning.
Yeah.
But they felt that it was because it involves medical, because it's assisted, that they would let that go, but they are not going to budge on the hotel.
Yeah.
To Dan's point, in regards to the other undeveloped parcels further to the east, The developer in their letter here even suggested that it must be part of a planned development consisting of at least 20 acres, which would prohibit it from being realized anywhere else south of 94 or on the other B5 parcel over on 83.
There's a B5 on 83.
Roger?
And if you blink, you miss it. It's really small.
My thought is that, first of all, I appreciate all these concerns that have been raised, and I think they are concerns that should be considered by the developer. In answer to your fundamental question is, should we make a decision today, or should it be applied, the application be by the developer? Different than the previous motion that we had, because I think the stakes are different. I think my preference would be to, given all the concerns here, but most importantly, it reflects on the investment that the developer really is making here. I think it's up to them to make the application knowing all these concerns, see what they come up with in more definitive terms, and then we can review it at that time before we make any action on any kind of change in an ordinance related to this hotel, hospital, however you define it. Remember, at the last meeting, they said that the hotel concept was brought up by the provider of the service because they use it in other areas. They didn't, the developer, come up with it, whatever the weight that is. But it's important because that means that they didn't come here with a preconceived idea. They got it from somebody else because they do that kind of work in providing medical services and lodging facilities. My point here is I think we have to put the onus on the developer because they may not come here or they'll come and go. Let's put the investment process in their hands, because if they're really making this commitment, give them the opportunity to sell it to us, and then we can review and evaluate it. And we don't want to be limited in our future developments by certain language related to this unless we hear from them. To do it separate and distinct from that application from them, I think puts a limitation on us in the future. So my vote would be to not decide today.
Well, we wouldn't decide anything today.
No, but my decision.
We would simply potentially schedule a public hearing, and then staff would create a list of qualifiers that you would, like a menu of things you might select from to limit, how the hotel could be used in B5, and then we just have a discussion about it. May not even take action on it after the public hearing, right? May determine, but it could be a 2, 3, 4 month process, right? So.
Well, I think that's fair to the developer and to us as the commission. It's a process that needs to be worked out.
Yeah.
And I think the burden should be on them to make the application, not us.
I would like a little more detail into exactly what this hospital is, because about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we denied one for over an 83 that sounded similar to this. And I find it really hard to understand why something that small needs a hotel with 90 rooms. It's not a freighter. It's not a pro-health.
I think also it was the nursing home.
Right.
It wasn't just the hospital.
Right, it's all the things in the medical
with
campus.
the hospital and the nursing home.
Right.
I don't want to say nursing home.
Assisted
living. Assisted living.
I think the size of the hotel is going to be debated, and they'll have to make that case. It's whether or not we would allow a hotel in B5, and I think that, I'm with Jim, let them make the case.
Give us some more details.
Yeah.
Bob or Ed, any opinion or?
Yeah, the conversation actually answered a lot of the questions or thoughts I had. I think it is a good idea to have the developer come back and give us an idea to start with, get public opinion on it so we can go in the right direction on this. I don't know if we could sit here and say, okay, if we want to let a hotel, we're going to restrict the type of vehicles that can show up.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, I like the Harley that's in my garage, and I'm okay with that. Or whatever it may be, someone's driving. So, that being said, I think it's worth considering, at least hearing what the public has to say on this.
Well, sure, absolutely. Bob, anything, or are you good?
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone said. I mean, perhaps we could, if Harleys are part of the issue and the noise, then perhaps we could have the hotel closer to the freeway with the parking on that side of the street. Just a thought, but
Okay.
Obviously, we'll go through a lot of process here.
All right, so it looks to me like we're not scheduling any public hearing, and we're just going to move forward without any action.
Thank you.
I'll relay that to the developer, and if they move forward, that'll be part of their application.
Okay, building inspector?
I have nothing to report.
Nothing.
Get out of here.
All right, seeing no further business, number 9, we are adjourned. Thank